Buy these fine, well-trained defensive oil rocks. All you need to do is pay $2,000.
More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette.
Remember when life was weird, wild, and somehow perfect in its chaos? In the 1970s, these moments weren't just quirks. They were part of everyday joy, stitched into schoolyards, shag carpets, and Saturday mornings. But if they made us laugh so hard, why did we stop? There was a time when people willingly paid money for a rock. Not a painted rock, not a crystal, not even one shaped like something cool, just a plain gray lump in a box with breathing holes. It came with a training manual, as if your new best friend might roll over and fetch if you spoke gently enough. These things were marketed as the perfect low-maintenance pet. No mess, no food, and no emotional responsibility. Kids gave them names, made beds for them, even took them to school like proud parents. If you did not own one, someone you knew definitely did, and they would let you know how loyal their rock was. It was the only time in history when doing absolutely nothing was marketed as genius. And somehow it worked. Parents bought it because it was cheaper than a hamster. Kids loved it because it felt weirdly rebellious. No batteries, no fur, just vibes. This was peak 1970s nonsense, and we loved every ridiculous second of it. Nothing captures the oddball charm of that decade quite like the moment we collectively agreed a paperweight was a living companion. And do not lie. You probably tried to find one in your backyard and pass it off as the real deal. Imagine handing kids 2 acrylic marbles the size of golf balls and telling them to smack them together as hard and fast as possible. What could go wrong? A lot, actually. Clackers were the noisiest, most chaotic toys of the early 1970s, and every kid wanted a pair. You'd swing the string and try to get the balls clacking above and below your hand like some kind of rhythmic war drum. Mastering the technique took real skill, but when it went wrong, and oh it did, you had 2 solid plastic spheres hurtling toward your face at light speed. The sound they made was somewhere between a metronome and an airstrike. Teachers hated them, parents dreaded them. But to kids, they were cooler than lava lamps. Some even cracked and exploded from the sheer force, sending sharp shards across classrooms. Yes, these were marketed to children. It was loud, it was dangerous, and it was pure 1970s joy. Safety was more of a polite suggestion than a requirement back then. And every kid who owned clackers wore the bruises like medals of honor. They were banned in many schools and recalled in some states, but not before every child had a chance to swing their way into chaos. There was no escaping them. Leisure suits were everywhere, and not just on disco floors. Picture this: a grown man, chest hair gleaming under gold chains, sweating through a double-knit polyester jacket in full sunlight. This was not just fashion. It was a national movement. The jacket matched the pants, and sometimes even the shirt. You were not just going out, you were making a statement. And that statement was, "I am incredibly flammable but undeniably groovy." Most came in pastel shades like avocado green, mustard yellow, or burnt orange, making the wearer look like a couch from a dentist's waiting room. But that did not matter. If you owned one, you strutted like Travolta, even if you walked like your Uncle Stan. These suits did not breathe. They trapped heat like a greenhouse, and yet people wore them everywhere, from weddings to Wednesday night bowling. If you were really bold, you paired it with platform shoes and a gold-plated belt buckle big enough to pick up radio signals. The leisure suit was the 1970s in clothing form. Loud, synthetic, and deeply committed to the bit. It was a time when fashion said, "Function? Never heard of her." And somehow, we pulled it off. Buy a ring, slip it on your finger, and learn the secrets of your soul. At least that is what the ads promised. Mood rings in the 1970s were not just novelty jewelry. They were emotion detectors. Feeling sad, blue, excited, purple, annoyed that your brother stole your 8-track tape? Green, apparently. These little thermochromic miracles changed color with your body temperature and had entire decoding charts to interpret their meaning. Kids wore them like emotional badges. Grown-ups wore them to parties. Some people even based relationship decisions on their mood ring's hue. He says he loves me, but his ring turned brown. No one stopped to ask whether finger heat was really the key to our deepest feelings. It just felt true. It was science and magic and fashion, all rolled into one $3 accessory. Teachers had to tell students to stop checking their mood rings mid-quiz. Everyone thought theirs was broken if it turned black, and panicked appropriately. And sure, in hindsight, they were just cheap metal bands with heat-sensitive goo inside. But for a while, they gave us a reason to look at our hands and say, "Wow, I guess I am relaxed." That kind of power was priceless. You know what screams luxury? Wall-to-wall shag carpeting? You know what screams why did we do this? Carpet in the bathroom. The 1970s did not care. If there was a floor, it deserved fuzz. Thick, high-pile shag in orange, brown, lime green, even purple. It was not just flooring, it was a lifestyle. You did not walk on it, you sank into it. Entire homes looked like someone tried to upholster the earth. And bathrooms? Somehow, those got the worst of it. Imagine stepping out of a steamy shower onto something that stays damp for days. Mold? Mildew? Minor concerns. At the time, people wanted warmth and comfort from tile to toilet. Carpet went up the walls. It climbed stairs. It matched your drapes and your couch. You vacuumed like it was a full-body workout, because that much fluff did not go down easy. The colors faded. The smells stayed. But at the time, it was pure elegance. Every kid remembers belly flopping onto it during cartoons, or losing small objects in its depths forever. We thought it was cozy. We thought it was chic. We were wrong. But oh, how it felt right at the time. If you have never adjusted an old television antenna, you do not know struggle. The picture was fuzzy. The sound was crackly. The solution? Aluminum foil and some deeply committed arm acrobatics. You would wrap the foil around the rabbit ears, bend them in every direction, and pray you landed somewhere between static and sitcom. Someone always stood next to the TV, holding the antenna at a weird angle, because that was the only position that worked. Watching MASH turned into a family project. "Do not move! You had the signal! Go back!" Even pets learned not to walk past the television during important scenes. On a good day, you might get 3 channels. On a great day, the weather was just right to pick up a 4th. But that 4th channel came with ghost images and a high-pitched whine. Still, we watched. Why? Because we earned it. Because we fought for it. Tin foil was not just kitchenware, it was broadcast gold. It was the Wi-Fi booster of its time. And somehow, it made you feel like an engineer just for making All in the Family come in clear. If you have ever heard a duck sing in falsetto, then you already know too much. Disco Duck was a 1976 novelty song performed in a Donald Duck voice, and it hit #1 on the charts. Yes, a duck, doing disco, and people loved it. It played at school dances, skating rinks, house parties. You could not escape its quack-fueled funk. The guy behind it, Rick Dees, was a radio DJ who accidentally created the most delightfully absurd hit of the decade. The song had dance moves. The duck had fans. It was bizarre and brilliant all at once. And honestly, it made total sense in the 1970s. This was a time when a talking frog could sell coffee and a grown man in a polyester suit could be a sex symbol. A disco duck was just part of the natural order. Kids sang it, adults danced to it, and no one questioned why a feathered voice was narrating their nightlife. It was catchy, it was camp, and it was exactly what the world needed in a decade that thrived on weird. The best part? You can still find the record in vintage shops like a tiny piece of audio chaos waiting to quack again. There was a time when your family doctor could look you in the eye, puff on a menthol cigarette, and say, "This one is smooth on the throat." That time was the 1970s. Cigarette companies ran ads with actors in lab coats or real physicians talking about how cool, refreshing, and mild certain brands were. 4 out of 5 doctors allegedly recommended them. You could open a magazine and see a smiling dentist lighting up. Hospitals had smoking lounges, ashtrays sat in waiting rooms, and no one batted an eye. Some commercials even claimed their brand caused less coughing or helped digestion. Yes, really. Kids watching those ads grew up thinking smoking was practically healthy. If your doctor said it was fine, it had to be, right? It was not just marketing, it was medicine, with a lighter. Looking back, it is surreal. But in that moment, it was normal. Comforting even. The science was still catching up, but the style was already there. These ads did not just sell tobacco, they sold trust. And that made them some of the most quietly disturbing moments in television history. We laughed at them later, but in the 1970s, we nodded along. You were not really there to watch the movie, let us be honest. Drive-in theaters in the 1970s were more about atmosphere and maybe a little mischief than anything on the screen. You pulled up with your friends, a date, or an entire family packed into the trunk to sneak in for free. You hooked the little metal speaker to your car window, and the audio quality was one notch above a tin can. And the windows? Fogged within minutes. From popcorn steam, teenage breath, or other activities. People brought blankets, snacks, and the occasional dog. Half the cars left halfway through the film. Someone always hit a speaker pole. And even if you stayed for the double feature, you barely remembered what played. It was about being there, under the stars, in your own little cocoon of tin and vinyl, the smell of popcorn in the air, the murmur of dialogue through 100 car windows. It was romance. It was rebellion. It was a deeply American kind of weird. And while most of them have vanished, the memory of sitting in a steamy car, pretending to care about the movie, lives on in everyone who ever snuck into one. These bikes were not just transportation. They were declarations of freedom. Bright colors, high handlebars, chrome fenders that caught the sun like disco balls, and that signature banana seat, long enough for two, slick enough to slide off if you hit a pothole. These bikes were paraded like trophies. You would cruise the neighborhood, your tall plastic flag flapping behind you like you were leading a one-kid parade. The flags were not there for safety. They were there for flair. Some even had tassels or lightning bolt decals. If you had a horn or a handlebar mirror, you were royalty. And if your parents sprang for a gear shift, forget it. You were unstoppable. Kids traded stickers, raced down hills, and popped wheelies like daredevils. Scraped knees were a badge of honor. Riding these bikes felt like flying, even if the only thing airborne was your ego. They made you feel older, cooler, bolder. And no matter how cheap or beat up they got, you never wanted to let them go. They were part bicycle, part identity. And if yours had a glitter seat, you were basically a celebrity. You were not successful in the 1970s unless you were yelling into a car phone the size of a loaf of bread. Mounted in your luxury sedan or stuffed into a leather shoulder bag, it had one job: to make you look like a corporate god. Never mind that it weighed as much as a dumbbell and barely worked outside a 3-mile radius of your office. You flipped it open, pulled out the antenna like a sword, and shouted over static, "I am in the car!" Half the time, the other person could not hear you. The other half, you could not hear them. But that was not the point. The point was status. This was not about communicating. It was about broadcasting power. You could be a real estate agent, a lawyer, or just a guy who knew how to fake it. Either way, the car phone gave you an aura of importance and neck strain. Calls dropped constantly, the bills were insane, and the thing got so hot it could burn your ear. Still, if you were holding that phone up to your face while parked at a drive-in or cruising down the highway, you looked like you were living in the future. A very loud, very expensive, totally unnecessary future. Back in the 1970s, you were not really expressing yourself unless you were doing it through a weird t-shirt. The weirder, the better. I am with stupid and a big arrow? Iconic. Disco sucks in big block letters? Rebellious. Have a nice day with a terrifying smiley face? Totally normal. These shirts were not just clothes, they were statements. Statements that often made no sense but made people laugh anyway. Some featured cartoon frogs drinking beer. Others had random phrases like "instant human, just add coffee." Nobody questioned it. In fact, the less it made sense, the more people wanted one. Tie-dye? Check. Iron-on graphics? Even better. You could walk into a mall and walk out looking like a walking billboard for nonsense. Parents wore them. Teenagers wore them. Even toddlers wore shirts that said things like, "Here comes trouble," as if chaos was hereditary. These shirts let you skip small talk. You just showed up and let your chest do the talking. Whether you were sarcastic, grumpy, overly cheerful, or just deeply confused, there was a shirt that said it for you. And if you were really committed, you matched it with short shorts and tube socks. That was your whole personality right there. Roller disco was beautiful chaos. You showed up in a sparkling outfit, maybe a sequin vest, some bell-bottoms, and enough glitter to blind an entire crowd. Then you strapped wheels to your feet and danced in the dark. What could go wrong? Everything. Someone always tripped on a loose lace. Someone else lost control during a backward spin. And before you knew it, bam! You were part of a 4-person pile-up under a disco ball. Strobe lights made it impossible to see. The music was so loud you could not hear anyone screaming, "Look out!" And yet, we did it. Every weekend. Places like Skateland were packed wall-to-wall with teens trying to reenact Saturday Night Fever on wheels. The DJ shouted into a microphone while people crashed into snack bars and walls. Couples tried to hold hands and skate romantically. They almost always fell. It did not matter. You got up, brushed off the glitter, and jumped right back into the groove. Sometimes you left with a bruised knee or a sprained wrist, but in the moment, under the colored lights with that funky bass line playing, you were unstoppable. Just pray your outfit survived the fall, and maybe wear a helmet next time. You remember the Pinto, or maybe you remember the explosion jokes. Because yes, that car could turn a fender bender into fireworks. The Ford Pinto was small, affordable, and everywhere in the 1970s. It also had a nasty little flaw. The gas tank was basically in the rear bumper. Rear-end collisions had a chance of turning your budget ride into a rolling bonfire. But that did not stop people from buying them in droves. They were cute, they were cheap, and they had just enough horsepower to get to the roller rink or the burger joint. Drivers treated them like any other car until they got tapped from behind and the back seat turned into a grill. You heard the stories. Someone would gently back into a Pinto and boom. Lawsuits flew, jokes exploded. Suddenly, everyone knew someone who saw it happen. Ford tried to downplay it, but the public caught on fast. And yet, the Pinto kept selling. Because in the 1970s, even your car was a gamble. You drove fast, parked carefully, and prayed nobody sneezed near your bumper. And if you owned one, you either played it cool or nervously checked your mirrors at every stoplight. A grown man in a leather jacket punching a jukebox became a god. Arthur Fonzarelli, the Fonz, was not just a character, he was an attitude. He was the cool guy every 1970s kid wanted to be and every parent pretended to understand. He snapped his fingers and girls appeared. He smacked machines and they worked. He gave a thumbs up and said, "Aye," and somehow that was a whole language. Schools had Fonzie posters. Teenagers slicked their hair back and practiced leaning against lockers. Adults wore leather jackets that made them sweat like rotisserie chickens, just to feel 1% cooler. He was on lunchboxes. He was in magazines. And he somehow made being a high school dropout look like a life goal. Parents who hated rebellion made exceptions for Fonzie. He was polite. He was tough. He respected grandmas and rode a motorcycle. If you could pull off that combination, you earned your leather. Even people who had never watched Happy Days knew the legend. The guy made jukeboxes work by elbowing them. He was basically a walking cheat code. And if you said sit on it, just right, you won the whole cafeteria. That was Fonzie power. They were not just headphones. They were headgear. Giant foam-padded beasts that clamped onto your skull like audio vices. You could not hear anything around you, but that was the point. These headphones were the size of dinner plates and looked like something astronauts wore to talk to Houston. And still, they were a must-have. You would plug them into your stereo or record player, press play on your favorite album, maybe some Zeppelin or the Bee Gees, and disappear into your own fuzzy soundscape. They were heavy. They made your hair flat. After 20 minutes, your ears were sweating, but you looked cool, or at least you felt cool. Walking into a room with those headphones on your head made a statement. I am serious about my music. The cords stretched across the room like a tripwire. Someone always got tangled in it, and if you dropped them, forget it. That was a family heirloom. These things were built like tanks, and you treated them with respect, even if they slowly crushed your skull while playing Stairway to Heaven. Sound quality? Questionable. Style? Unmatched. If you lived through the 1970s, chances are you were surrounded by a web of rope. Macrame was not a hobby. It was a movement. People were tying knots like their lives depended on it. Plant holders, wall hangings, hammocks, purses, lampshades, you name it, someone tied it. It looked like every home had been taken over by a very stylish spider. You could not walk into a living room without seeing at least one drooping vine dangling from a knotted nest in the corner. The yarn was thick, the colors were earthy, and the patterns were, frankly, kind of hypnotic. Even if you had no plants, you needed a plant hanger. Bonus points if you made it yourself. Macrame classes were the rage. Craft stores sold out of cord. And every aunt had a living room that looked like a jungle gym for houseplants. People got ambitious. Room dividers, belts, even bikinis. Yes, macrame swimsuits were a thing. Comfort was optional. Art was everything. And while most of it now sits in vintage shops or your grandma's attic, at the time it felt like the future of home decor. A little twisted, a little tangled, and absolutely everywhere. Big feet, bigger vibes. If you were alive in the 1970s, you saw the keep on truckin' guy at least once a day. He was on t-shirts, bumper stickers, lunchboxes, notebooks. You could not escape him. That cartoon dude with the long legs and the exaggerated strut became a national icon. But here is the thing. No one really knew why. It started as a comic by Robert Crumb, part of the underground scene. But then the drawing exploded into mainstream culture, and suddenly everyone was truckin'. What did it mean? Keep going. Keep living. Keep moving forward, even if your shoes were the size of sofas. It somehow captured the 1970s spirit perfectly. Confident, a little weird, and deeply committed to personal style. People said it like a mantra. Keep on truckin', man. It was peace and rebellion and resilience rolled into one groovy phrase. Kids drew it on book covers. Adults slapped it on their bumpers. No one questioned the anatomy of those legs, or why the dude looked like he was walking off a cliff. He just kept going. And we did too. You have not truly suffered until your bare leg touched a metal slide in the middle of July. Playgrounds in the 1970s were built like industrial accident zones. Solid metal swings, monkey bars that doubled as ladder traps, and seesaws that launched unsuspecting kids into orbit. Safety padding? Never heard of it. Shade? Only if you brought your own umbrella. And the slide? That was a solar panel in disguise. Kids lined up to willingly roast themselves for 5 seconds of scorching fun. The jungle gyms burned your palms. The merry-go-round gave you motion sickness and a concussion. But nobody complained. This was how you built character and calluses. Parents sat nearby, fanning themselves with newspapers while you baked like a pizza on aluminum foil. If you cried, they handed you a hose. It was simple. Toughen up or try the sandbox, also known as the neighborhood litter box. Still, every recess, we ran to it. Because that was our battlefield. Metal playgrounds separated the brave from the blistered. And if you could do the monkey bars without screaming once, you were a legend. In the 1970s, science and superstition went on a very weird date. That is how we got pyramid power. The idea was simple. Pyramids, like the ones in Egypt, had special energy, and if you wore a pyramid-shaped hat, or even slept under a cardboard pyramid, you could harness that cosmic force. What kind of power, you ask? Sharper razor blades, better meditation, preserved fruit. Some even believed it could relieve headaches or give psychic visions. Suddenly, pyramid kits were being sold in catalogs. People built pyramid frames in their living rooms. They meditated under them like spiritual Wi-Fi routers. It was not a joke, it was serious. Yogurt companies got in on it. Health stores displayed fruit under plastic pyramids to keep it fresh. Celebrities swore by them. And for a while, so did your neighbor who wore sandals year-round. Nobody could quite explain how it worked, but nobody wanted to be left out of the future. The whole trend was equal parts mysterious and absurd. But in a decade obsessed with expanding your mind and saving your soul, it somehow fit right in. Who needs logic when you have angles? Saturday mornings in the 1970s were sacred. You rolled out of bed in your pajamas, poured a bowl of sugary cereal the size of your head, and plopped in front of the television like it was your job. But here is the weird part. The cartoons laughed at themselves. Literally. Some genius decided cartoons needed laugh tracks. As if Scooby-Doo could not speak for himself, a crowd of invisible studio strangers would burst out laughing every time someone slipped on a banana peel. Even when it was not funny, especially when it was not funny, the laughs kept coming. It was like the cartoons were trying to convince you something hilarious had just happened. You were 6 years old, confused, and wondering why a ghost tripping over a trash can deserved a full round of applause. But it became background noise like the hum of a refrigerator or the jingle of toy commercials every 5 minutes. Every cartoon from the Flintstones to the Jetsons to those strange Sid and Marty Krofft live-action hybrids used it. Even the characters seemed unsure of what was going on. But it did not matter. You were hypnotized. The colors, the voices, the canned laughter, it all became one joyful blur. It was predictable, comforting, and just weird enough to feel magical. Besides, if the TV was laughing, that meant it had to be funny. Right? Walk into any 1970s photo album and you will see it. Entire families dressed like living room furniture. We are talking head-to-toe velour, crushed velvet jumpsuits, blinding floral shirts, and patterns that could give you motion sickness. It was not enough for your couch to be orange and brown plaid. You had to match it. You had to become it. Everyone looked like wallpaper came to life. Polyester ruled the kingdom. It was shiny, unbreathable, and made weird squeaking sounds when you moved too fast. But it stretched, and it matched your shag carpet. Some shirts had collars so big they could pick up radio signals. Pants were flared so wide you could parachute out of them. And everything had a pattern. Zigzags, swirls, paisley, sunbursts, flowers the size of dinner plates. If you wore stripes on top and checks on the bottom, that was not clashing. It was called making a statement. Even kids were not safe. You wore corduroy overalls in avocado green and turtlenecks that made your neck feel like it was in witness protection. And do not even get started on accessories. Huge belt buckles, tinted sunglasses, feathered hair. Looking back, it seems impossible that we all walked around like that. But in the moment, it was fabulous. It was groovy, and it was proudly, gloriously couchcore. There was no talent too small or too strange for the Gong Show. In fact, the stranger, the better. This 1970s game show was like a variety act mixed with a fever dream. People got on national television to perform nose flute solos, tap dance in gorilla costumes, or juggle rubber chickens while yodeling. And somehow, that was the point. The show thrived on chaos. A panel of half-smirking celebrity judges sat ready to hit a giant gong if your act was truly unbearable, which happened a lot. But that did not stop people from trying. Contestants signed up to do synchronized kazoo routines or belly dance while reciting math facts. The host, Chuck Barris, was part ringmaster, part wild-eyed uncle at a wedding. He would laugh, dance, shout nonsense, and cheer on the madness like it was Shakespeare. And the best part? The audience loved it. They clapped, screamed, booed, and occasionally danced in the aisles. Winners got a tiny check, maybe a hug, and eternal bragging rights that they were not gonged. The losers? Honestly, most of them did not care. Just getting 5 minutes to dress like a banana and sing about algebra was enough. It was silly, it was confusing, and it was pure, unfiltered 1970s television, the kind of chaos you just do not get anymore. Act now, only $9.99. That was not a suggestion. That was a command. Commercials in the 1970s did not gently inform you, they yelled. Every product, from cleaning sprays to Ginsu knives to glow-in-the-dark stickers, came with a pitchman who sounded like he had 5 seconds to live. These ads were less about features and more about panic. "You'll miss it! Limited time! Call now!" It felt like the guy on screen had consumed 4 pots of coffee and was trapped in the studio until someone bought something. The graphics were shaky, the music was over the top, and the deals? Suspiciously exact. Not $20, not $15, just $9.99. And they always threw in something extra. But wait, there's more! Suddenly you were getting 3 cutting boards, a free cookbook, and a pocket calculator shaped like a watermelon. Phone numbers flashed in giant red font. Operators were always standing by. Kids memorized jingles. Parents argued over whether it was a scam or a steal. Half the time, the product never worked. But that did not matter, because the yelling worked. You sat on the couch, heart racing, unsure whether you needed a food dehydrator or a miracle mop, but absolutely certain you had to decide right now. In the 1970s, Jell-O was not just a dessert, it was a lifestyle. And somewhere along the way, someone decided everything should go inside it. Tuna? Sure. Shredded carrots? Absolutely. Hot dogs? Why not? Dinner turned into a game of what horrifying thing will jiggle at me tonight. There were whole cookbooks dedicated to savory gelatin molds, complete with color photos that made you question reality. A popular one involved lime Jell-O, cottage cheese, chopped celery, and canned pineapple, served in a bundt pan. This was called a salad. There was something called aspic, which is French for meat Jell-O, and it involved beef broth gelatin with olives, peas, and ham cubes floating like forgotten dreams. People brought these to parties proudly. They unmolded them with a flourish. "Try the shrimp mold," they would say, as if that were not a culinary cry for help. And yet, somehow, it was normal. It was fashionable. Kids poked at it. Adults smiled through bites. If you were lucky, dessert Jell-O showed up later, with marshmallows and whipped cream, not sardines. But until then, you endured layer after layer of mysterious, wiggling ambition. Jell-O was a texture, a color, a prank hiding in plain sight. And in the 1970s, it was everywhere. TV dinners were more than food. They were a revolution in a foil tray. You'd pull one from the freezer, peel back the corner, and slide it into the oven with a hope and a prayer. 25 minutes later, you had dinner. Kind of. The mashed potatoes were crusty on one side and icy on the other. The gravy had merged with the corn. And that chocolate brownie in the corner? A molten rock capable of scorching the roof of your mouth until Tuesday. But none of that mattered, because you got to eat on a metal tray in the living room while watching All in the Family. You didn't need to set the table. You didn't need to talk. TV dinners gave families a strange kind of freedom, the freedom to be alone together. The funny part is how futuristic they felt, even though they were never that good. But they were consistent, they were easy. And in a time when everyone was juggling work, inflation, and nuclear anxiety, convenience was king. We laugh now. But we kept buying them, because they gave us time. And that, back then, was worth more than taste. Cabbage Patch Kid frenzy turned toy stores into battlegrounds. These soft-bodied dolls with unique, slightly odd faces were the must-have gift of the 1980s. Each one came with a birth certificate and adoption papers, making it feel like you were bringing home a real baby. But getting your hands on one? That was another story. Parents lined up at dawn. Some camped overnight. Others sprinted through department stores in scenes more suited to action movies than holiday shopping. There were arguments, tears, the occasional tackle, and when someone finally scored a doll, they clutched it like it was made of gold. Kids loved them. They named them, dressed them, and carried them everywhere. Some families had to settle for knockoffs with names like Garden Patch Pals that never quite felt the same. But if you had a real one, you were a legend. Looking back, it seems wild that a doll caused so much chaos. But in that moment, nothing mattered more. Cabbage Patch Kids were not just toys, they were trophies. Proof that your parents had braved the crowds and won. And decades later, those round faces still sit on shelves, quietly remembering the madness they caused. Limited or no air conditioning meant summer nights were a battle with the heat. The box fan sat in the window, humming like a tired engine, barely moving the thick air. You sweated through your sheets, drank warm water, slept with the lights off and the windows wide open, hoping for a breeze that never came. Some homes had one window unit, and it stayed in the living room. Everyone gathered there like refugees from the sun. No one moved. The couch was soaked in humidity. Tempers flared, ice trays emptied fast. You wore as little as possible, stuck your head in the fridge, and counted the hours until dark. At school, kids talked about central air. You could not imagine it. The idea of a whole house being cool felt like science fiction. You made popsicles out of juice in ice cube trays. You wrapped wet washcloths around your neck. You laid on the floor, hoping the tile was cooler than the bed. And through it all, you survived. Uncomfortable, sticky, and half asleep, but alive. No air conditioning was not ideal, but it made you tough, and it taught you how to endure heat, not just in your house, but in life. Taping songs off the radio was a sacred mission. You would sit for hours next to your boombox, finger hovering over the record button, praying that the next song would be the one. And when it was, you had one shot to catch it clean, no static, no interruptions, and above all, no DJ talking over the intro. But of course, they always did. The opening notes would hit, your heart would race, and just as you hit record, that was the latest from Madonna. Coming up next, we've got... And just like that, your perfect mixtape moment was ruined. You would yell at the radio like the DJ could hear you. Why? Why do you do this to me? It was a battle of timing and nerves. Some kids got sneaky and recorded during the night shift when the hosts were quieter. Others became masters of timing, predicting when the chorus would drop, when the ad break would hit. It took real skill. And even if you missed a few seconds of the intro, you still labeled the tape like it was gold. You were not just building a playlist, you were capturing a moment. Free music, sure, but earned through effort, patience, and pure willpower. And if you were serious about your song collection, you were not stopping at one track. You were building an entire soundscape, one emotional banger at a time. Walk into an old house and open a closet door, and you might get hit with a smell that is oddly comforting, woody, warm, a little spicy. That would be cedar, not a scent diffuser, not a spray. Actual cedar wood, lined across the walls of the closet from top to bottom. These cedar-lined closets were the silent guardians of America's wardrobes. They protected against moths, mildew, and musty smells. But they also added a kind of rustic luxury, like storing your clothes inside a tree trunk at a high-end cabin. The idea was simple. Cedar wood naturally repels insects, so why not turn your entire closet into a bug-proof haven? People did not just store coats in there, they kept heirlooms, wool suits, and seasonal clothes safe year-round. Some closets were fully lined, others just had a single cedar panel on one wall. Either way, it gave the whole room a spa vibe long before that was a thing. These days, you might see cedar blocks or hangers sold in stores, but entire closets made of the stuff? That has faded into the woodwork, literally. The world got synthetic, and the cedar charm became a relic. But if you think that was clever, wait until you see how people used to pass food across rooms without ever leaving their chair. They were not just vehicles, they were dreams on wheels, decked out in shag carpet and questionable murals of wizards and wolves. Vansploitation films took the freedom and rebellion of the open road and turned it into cinematic chaos. The plot usually did not matter. A guy, a girl, a van, and a summer full of terrible decisions, that was enough. The Van in 1977 set the tone, a teenage fantasy of cruising, partying, and trying to look cool while living in your car. And people loved it. Because those vans were more than transportation. They were rolling bedrooms, bars, escape pods. They had curtains. They had couches. Some had lava lamps. If you were lucky, yours had an 8-track player and speakers in the back. The funny part is how deeply uncool it looks now. But at the time, It was everything: independence, adventure, privacy. For a generation raised on rules, the van was a loophole with fuzzy dice on the mirror. Acid wash jeans were loud before you even opened your mouth. With their blotchy patterns and faded splotches, they looked like someone had taken a bleach bottle to denim, and somehow that became cool. These jeans were rebellious, messy, and unmistakably 1980s. Everyone had a pair. Some wore them tight-rolled at the ankle, others let them drape over high-top sneakers. Acid wash showed up in jackets, skirts, and full matching sets that turned entire outfits into walking eye strain. You could not blend in wearing acid wash. You stood out, and that was the point. It was denim with attitude. Rough, bold, a little chaotic. Parents hated it. Teachers rolled their eyes. But teens embraced the weirdness. It felt edgy, like you were wearing the uniform of a generation that refused to dress quietly. Old photographs now show groups of kids lined up in front of lockers, each one looking like they had just emerged from a bleach accident and loving it. Acid wash was not timeless, it was not flattering, but it was unforgettable. And in a decade known for excess, it fit right in. Even now, pulling on an old pair brings back the noise, the neon, and the thrill of breaking the fashion rules. Limited extracurricular activities were just another way the world reminded you what you could not afford. Other kids had piano lessons, karate classes, and sports teams with matching uniforms. You had afternoons at home watching TV or playing outside with a stick and a rock. Sign-up fees were too high, equipment cost too much. Even the rides to practice were out of reach if the car was needed for work. You brought home the flyers from school and left them on the table, hoping. Sometimes they just disappeared. Sometimes your parents gently explained that maybe next time meant probably never. You cheered from the sidelines, you watched from the crowd, and you learned how to clap with a smile even when your heart wanted in. It was not fair, it stung, but you found other ways to grow. You read library books, you drew comics in the margins of your notebook, you played tag until the sun went down, and maybe you missed out on trophies and tournaments, but you learned resilience, creativity, and how to find joy in the quiet spaces. You might not have worn the jersey, but you still showed up, and that mattered. The Columbia House penny deal felt like a loophole in the universe. You sent in a little card, maybe glued a few stamps to it, and next thing you knew, your mailbox was blessed with 12 brand new cassette tapes, or compact discs if you were ahead of the curve, all for just 1 cent. 1 cent. It felt like a scam in your favor. No way this is real, you thought. But there it was. Whitney Houston, Prince, Bon Jovi, Huey Lewis, boom! Delivered to your doorstep like you were some kind of record label executive. Of course, the catch was that you had to buy more albums at full price later. Parents were suspicious. Some tried to stop you. Others fell into the trap themselves. It was like a rite of passage. A shared secret. A little music heist you got away with. Until the bill came due, of course. Still, there was no denying the power of opening that box. Shrink-wrapped covers. That new plastic smell. Your very own collection. But for real-time music discovery? You only needed one thing. 3 letters, 1 channel, and a whole lot of attitude. You would toss it in and forget about it. That was the beauty of the laundry chute. A small hatch built right into the hallway wall or bathroom cabinet, leading straight down into a hamper, or sometimes directly into the basement laundry room. Just open, drop, and go. These vertical passageways were like magic portals for dirty socks and sweaty gym clothes. No more lugging baskets down 2 flights. No more arguments about whose turn it was. You just lifted the flap and let gravity do the work. Kids treated them like secret tunnels. Parents treated them like a godsend. But like many good things, laundry chutes eventually went out of style. Safety concerns popped up, especially with young kids and pets. And then there was the fire risk, as an open shaft could let smoke and flames move between floors. Add in the rise of compact laundry machines on upper levels, and suddenly the chute became obsolete. But admit it, there is still something satisfying about the idea of chucking a shirt through the wall. And speaking of walls, Wait until you hear about the windows that were not exactly windows. It buzzed, it pulsed, it barely made sense. Minimal wave was not made for sing-alongs or car radios. It was made for empty rooms, lit by green fluorescent lights and lonely kids who wanted to feel like machines. Stripped down, bare, cold, and perfect, this was the birth of synth music, and it did not ask for your approval. It just started humming in the background of the late 1970s like a glitch in the system. While disco dominated the airwaves and arena rock-filled stadiums, minimal wave snuck in through the basement. Quiet, awkward, and strangely magnetic. The synthesizers were raw, the drum machines were stiff, and the vocals? Half-spoken, half-sung, all emotion buried under static. But somehow, it worked. It was hypnotic. It was weirdly beautiful in the way a broken radio can be beautiful. And for the misfits, the loners, the kids who did not see themselves in glitter and leather, minimal wave was a new kind of mirror. The funny part is how ahead of its time it was. Nobody knew that in 10 years everyone would be chasing that sound. But if you were there at the beginning, it felt like a secret the future had whispered just to you. Trapper keepers were not just school supplies, they were status symbols. With their Velcro flaps and glossy over-the-top covers, they turned every classroom into a silent competition of who had the coolest binder. Some featured racing cars. Others showed rainbows, unicorns, or abstract laser patterns straight out of a sci-fi fever dream. Inside, everything was neatly organized. Folders, dividers, loose-leaf paper, and secret notes passed during math class. The Velcro made a loud rip every time you opened it, an announcement that learning was about to begin, or at least be attempted. Trapper keepers made you feel like you had your life together, even if your grades said otherwise. Teachers had a love-hate relationship with them. They were bulky, distracting, but undeniably effective at keeping your stuff in one place. And if you had one with a matching pencil case, you were royalty. Years later, people still remember the smell of the plastic, the feel of flipping through those laminated folders, and the thrill of sliding in a new pack of notebook paper. Trapper keepers were not just for school, they were for showing off, staying organized, and feeling like you had a little piece of the future in your backpack. Reliance on government assistance programs was not a choice. It was the only way to get by. Food stamps came in paper booklets, torn out in the checkout line with quiet hands and sideways glances. School lunches were free, but they came with their own kind of price. Standing in a separate line, hearing the whispers, seeing the looks. You carried a different card, a different meal, a different kind of burden. The people behind the counter never said anything, but you knew. Everyone knew. At home, government cheese filled the fridge. Powdered milk sat on the shelf. The pantry was stocked with cans stamped from surplus stores, beans, peanut butter, cereal that tasted like cardboard but kept you full. Your parents made it stretch. They made it work, and they told you to hold your head up even when you wished you could vanish. Because pride does not feed a family. Assistance was not shameful, it was survival. It was how your shoes fit, how your stomach was full, how you still made it to class with something in your bag. And though some days it felt heavy, it also meant someone, somewhere, knew you were worth helping. Even when the world made you forget. Before Fandango or streaming apps told us what was playing, there was the operator. And calling the theater was an event in itself. You would dial a number, usually a long one, and wait as a robotic voice or sometimes an actual person listed off every movie and showtime like it was the State of the Union. Showtimes for the weekend of July 24th, Gremlins at 7:30, The Goonies at 9:15, Ghostbusters at 10:45. You could not skip ahead. You had to listen. Carefully. And maybe even write it down if you were planning a big night. If someone in the house picked up the phone while you were listening, forget it. You had to start over. And if you called during a busy hour, good luck hearing anything over the static and background noise. But it was still exciting. The build-up, the anticipation. You felt like you were about to join something important, something bigger than yourself. Because back then, watching a movie meant going somewhere. It meant tickets, seats, sticky floors, and that one kid who always threw popcorn. It meant magic. But if you wanted movie magic at home, You did not need a theater. You just needed to clear your schedule, grab the good blanket, and stake your claim on the couch. Bathroom incinerators were exactly what they sound like. Tiny metal boxes installed near the toilet, designed to burn trash right on the spot. Sounds efficient, right? Maybe. But also, just a little bit terrifying. These units were popular for a short time in the mid-20th century, mostly in homes that were obsessed with cutting-edge convenience. They were meant for tissues, cotton balls, wrappers, and small bits of waste, not, let us be clear, diapers or anything major. You would flip a switch, hear a low hum, and then wait while your trash slowly vanished into ash. It was like having a personal bonfire inside your bathroom. Some even came with a little chimney that vented outside. Of course, the smell was something. And safety? Let's just say it was a different time. These machines were prone to overheating, and if you put the wrong thing in, you might get more flames than you bargained for. Eventually, people realized that trash cans and weekly pickups were a whole lot safer, so the bathroom incinerator quietly disappeared, along with the era of lighting your garbage on fire next to your shampoo. But while the bathroom was heating up, the beauty routines of the day were getting pretty cool. And I mean that literally. Just wait until you see the hairdryers. Blacklight posters weren't just wall art. They were like secret messages to your future self, glowing with untamed energy in bedrooms lit by nothing but neon. You'd close the door, switch on the blacklight bulb, and the entire room transformed. Tigers snarled in ultraviolet orange, mushrooms shimmered with galactic pink, and skeletons danced across velvet paper like ghosts at a cosmic rave. You didn't need to be a teenager to love them, but you definitely felt like one the moment you saw one. They were psychedelic, electric, and sometimes downright disturbing. And that was the point. These posters weren't meant to calm you down. They were meant to blow your mind. Every friend who visited your room would stand and stare, half laughing, half lost in the glowing madness. You didn't always understand what you were looking at. And somehow, that made it cooler. They were rebellious in their own quiet way. Too weird for the living room. Too loud for the hallway. But perfect for the sacred space that was your bedroom. Looking back, it's funny how seriously we took them. But at the time, they were more than just decorations. They were personality printed in phosphorescence. Scratch and sniff stickers made notebooks smell like fruit salad, or something pretending to be. Grape, banana, pizza, popcorn. If it existed, there was probably a sticker that gave off a chemical approximation of it. These tiny scented rewards were currency on the playground. You earned them from teachers. You traded them with friends. You collected them in sticker books and flipped through your favorites like a sommelier of glue and artificial scent. Some smelled better than others. Some were so strong they made your eyes water. Others lost their smell after a few scratches but were kept anyway, honored like faded trophies. You knew the popular ones: root beer, bubble gum, and anything with glitter. You also knew the duds, like liverwurst or mystery meat, that somehow ended up in your binder anyway. Scratching a sticker in class was a quiet act of rebellion. You were not supposed to, but you did. And then you passed the notebook around so others could sniff and nod in approval, or gag in horror. Scratch and sniff stickers were low-tech fun with high nostalgic value. They turned paper into treasure. And even today, one whiff of fake strawberry is enough to transport you straight back to third grade with a smile. Using public transportation exclusively meant your life moved on someone else's schedule. There was no jumping in the car for milk, no last-minute rides. You waited. At bus stops, on corners, in the rain, in the cold, in your Sunday best or your work shoes. The bus was never early. Sometimes it was late. But you waited. You held a pocket full of exact change. Maybe a transfer stub. You knew the routes like the back of your hand. You sat near the front if you were tired, in the back if you did not want to talk. You watched strangers argue, laugh, cry. You saw your city from a different view, block by block, stop by stop. Owning a car seemed like another world. Gas, insurance, repairs. Those were luxuries. The bus was what you had, and it was enough. Sort of. It got you to school, to work, to church. You learned to carry groceries in bags that would not break. You made friends with the drivers. You memorized delays. And when the ride was over, you stepped off into whatever came next. Public transportation did not just move you. It taught you patience, resilience, and how to hold on when the brakes hit hard. Saturday morning cartoons were not just shows. They were rituals. You would wake up at 6 or 7, bowl of cereal in hand, and stake out your spot in front of the television before anyone else in the house even stirred, pajamas still on, eyes still half shut. But you were ready. The networks fought hard for your attention. ABC, NBC, CBS, they all rolled out animated powerhouses like The Smurfs, He-Man, The Real Ghostbusters, Gem, G.I. Joe, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Each show had its slot, and missing one felt like missing a holiday. But for every golden episode came the heartbreak of your favorite show being bumped, or worse, replaced. The dreaded special news report could interrupt your flow like a slap to the face. You would sit there in disbelief as your cartoon got pulled for a political debate or weather update. No warnings, no mercy. Still, the lineup gave you something to look forward to all week, and for those few hours, everything felt right in the world. Cartoons, cereal, and commercials that somehow got stuck in your head forever. Because let's be honest, there are still jingles from that era that we can sing from memory, word for word. Long before cell phones and even before cordless landlines, families had a different way of yelling through the walls. And no, it was not just yelling. We are talking about intercom systems. Installed in kitchens, bedrooms, garages, and hallways, these things were high-tech at the time. Built right into the wall, they had push buttons, tinny speakers, and a magical call button that could summon anyone from anywhere. It was like living inside your own hotel. "Dinner's ready," would echo from speaker to speaker. You could check in on the baby, call the kids in from the yard, or talk to your spouse while still folding laundry. They even had a radio function in some fancier models, so you could blast the news or music in every room. These systems were sold as time savers, but they also showed off how cutting-edge your home was. Nothing said modern American household like a wall-mounted microphone next to your fridge. Eventually, of course, they wore out. The wiring went bad, or the kids used them to eavesdrop. And just like that, they fell out of style, replaced by text messages, smart speakers, and yelling again. But if you ever stayed at Grandma's house and heard your name echo through a crackly little box, you will never forget it. Now, how about something we used to build into the wall that flipped down like a magic trick? Get ready, because we are unfolding something special. Walk through one, and you were instantly transported into another room, another vibe, another world. Beaded door curtains were not just home decor, they were portals. 1 second, you were in the hallway. The next, you were in your older sister's bedroom, where incense was burning and David Bowie was staring from the wall like a glittery prophet. The soft clatter of beads colliding became a soundtrack all its own. And you could never sneak through them, no matter how hard you tried. They were the tattletales of the 1970s, every clink a betrayal, every sway a confession. But they were also beautiful. Cheap, colorful, exotic in a way that felt grown up. You bought them at head shops, flea markets, or that one aisle in Woolworths that always smelled like patchouli. Whether they were made of bamboo, plastic, or little wooden cylinders painted to look like sunsets, beaded curtains promised something magical beyond them, something adult, something groovy, and everyone had them, or wanted them. The funny thing is how useless they were at actually dividing rooms or providing privacy. But who cared? In a time when the house was your kingdom and your bedroom was your castle, beaded curtains were your drawbridge. Boombox battles turned sidewalks into stages and backpacks into speaker cabinets. In the 1980s, carrying a massive boombox on your shoulder was more than a way to listen to music. It was a declaration. You had style, you had taste, and you had batteries heavy enough to power a small city block. These machines blasted everything from hip-hop to hair metal, and they did not ask for permission. You walked down the street with your soundtrack trailing behind you, volume all the way up, head nodding to the beat. Some kids parked them at basketball courts. Others lined them up outside corner stores. Whoever had the best bass usually won the crowd. Tapes were traded, dials were turned, And sometimes spontaneous dance-offs broke out right there on the pavement. Boomboxes were heavy, awkward, and impossible to ignore. But in a time before smartphones and Bluetooth, they were portable pride. They made noise. They made statements. And if you saw someone approach with a fresh cassette in hand and a boombox on their shoulder, you knew something good was about to happen. Boombox battles were not just about the music. They were about being seen, heard, and remembered. If any of this made you laugh, wince, or whisper, "Oh no, I remember that," drop your weirdest 70s memory in the comments, give this video a like, and subscribe so we can keep trucking through the past together.